Here.
Here.
Here, everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Everyone please be seated. With respect to the agenda, I have a couple things that we want to add to the agenda for this evening. One is that we are going to be having a change in board meeting date, at least proposed and discussed with the board, and that would be to have a special meeting for possible continuation of the budget, for next week on Monday, and we'll have some discussion proposal at the time. And then in lieu of, that will be in lieu of the meeting that's been scheduled for Thanksgiving week. So we'll, discuss that. That will be one item that I'd like to add to the agenda. Also, Mr. Moot has raised the attention, and I think Mr. Horan may have some comments, but with possibility of a new hilltop well, that has some urgency, to it. As the engineers got out there, they discovered that the current well couldn't be really remediated, and there's a proposal that I have some information on. Also, I have a proposal to present to the board with respect to the Metro North proposed fare, rate for parking increase. This is a resolution I'd like to propose. I add that to the agenda. And then this is a question, Mr. Horan, for you that I didn't notice until I was looking at correspondence. There's correspondence requesting new road name changes over in Maloney Heights, and I just saw that it's in correspondence. Is that sufficient if we vote on that to pass it, or should we have a resolution for those two proposed name changes?
I don't think there's any real urgency in getting that change, so I think for purposes of, having a record, because the written resolution has to go up to the county 911, so I think it'd be appropriate to have a written resolution regarding.
So in our December meeting, regular meeting after that's sufficient. Okay. So just to make it clear,
the road's still being worked on right now. So
but our
it's gonna be,
acceptance of the correspondence does not equate to approval. We just want to make it clear for that. So with that in mind, the agenda that I propose to add would be board dates, Metro North resolution, new Hilltop Road well proposal to be considered.
I'll move to amend the agenda to include those items.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any nays or abstentions? That motion passes. So now I have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
I'll move it.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any nays or abstentions? The motion passed. Next item is a motion to acknowledge the minutes of the October 28th, 2019 and November 6th, 2019 board meetings.
I'll move it.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any nays or abstentions? The motion passed. The next is a continuation of our budget proceedings, and we will have further discussion also later on. And as I mentioned, in connection perhaps next week as well, if needed. So this first item would be to open the public hearing on adopting the 2020 budget. So really a continuation of the last meeting that we had.
I'll move to open that hearing.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Is there anyone that has any discussion on the public hearing portion? We still may have some public portion issues, but this is the public hearing. Yes. No, this would be during the next public portion, since you want to comment on a specific item that we have here on the resolutions.
Seeing no comments, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing as to the 2020 budget.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any nays or abstentions? The motion passes. The next item is a motion to open the public portion of the meeting with respect to the discussion and the agenda items for resolutions, and that, Mr. Conte, is where you could come up. So do we have a motion?
Yes, I'll move to open the public portion.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Seeing none, the motion passed. So now, we're open for discussion with respect to the agenda item. We had a number of resolutions there, so anyone that would like to come up please feel free to do that. You know, so, Mr. Conte, you may come up since you indicated interest in doing it. Please identify yourself, your name, and your, where you reside in the town, not street address, but street is
Okay.
sufficient.
Yeah, my name is John Conti, and I've been a resident of Wappinger Falls for about 34 years. Very nice place to live. I'm here tonight to shed light on an issue, to kind of inform the board. I've already emailed some of the members some of the information, but it pertains to illegal street and residential driveway parking of commercial vehicles that are in excess of the current town code. This is something that's been going on for, believe it or not, 3.5 years. I've been working with Mr. Bertie in the zoning department. Some orders to remedy have been issued, but to date, the trucks are still there. I mean, I was woken up at 2 a.m. on Sunday morning by a flatbed tow truck with the beeps and the diesel engine, and this has been going on for a long, long time. I'm here to represent myself and also my neighbors. There's some of them in the back here with me. Raise your hand. Because we're all, pretty fed up with the situation. We have had the sheriff department come many, many times, the state police, and it seems that what they're telling us back in April is that the code needs to be clarified on how the weight is written on the codes, because right now it says 18,000 pounds gross weight. The vehicles that have been parking there, I have the DOT records and the motor vehicle records, are 21,500 and 25,900 pounds, so they're well over the limit. But the operators of the vehicles, which I think the company is based down in Carmel someplace, the zoning board they have all the information on the vehicles. They're saying that their actual weight is only 12,500. That's going by the title. So because the code says gross vehicle weight, and it doesn't say gross vehicle weight rating, this is what I'm told by the DOT, that someone could argue, I don't actually weigh 18,000, but it should say rating in the law, and that would clarify it, and that's what we're trying to get past. And I was here last month with several of my neighbors, and we sat through 3 hours of your meeting, which was kind of interesting, but it wound up getting tabled at the end of the meeting, so we were pretty frustrated at that point. Mr. Thurston had asked me to come and shed some light on it tonight, so that's what I'm here to do. And they need to be clarified, and one of the other issues is the enforcement needs to be a little bit better. Because I think if you send an order to remedy to 10 people, 9 of those people are going to comply. But there's always a holdout. There's somebody that look to give you a difficult time, and this is the situation here. But there really hasn't been a lot of penalties or a stiff enforcement, so I think they're kind of banking on that laxed enforcement, and that's why it's been going on for 3.5 years. We're kind of reaching out to you, want to inform you, and hopefully we can get this remedied, and I thank you very much for your attention and letting me come up here and talk. If anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
No, I'd like to thank Mr. Conte for coming. I had a conversation with him today. I also talked with our town attorney, and he clarified. That's honestly why I asked to table it at our last meeting.
Right.
And it's been clarified for me, along with Barbara from the building department. So I apologize for your inconvenience, and be rest assured we're going to remedy that this evening.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Stolman, did you have a comment with respect to the code, change?
Right.
That's been discussed a lot, but maybe you can shed some light on what was
It has been
proposed.
discussed a lot, and the wording, or the word that would be added is registered. So it would say registered gross vehicle weight instead of just gross vehicle weight.
Right.
And that's the proper wording that we've checked all around, and that would be adopted this evening.
Or at least it's up for consideration.
It's up for consideration, I shouldn't presume anything.
Right. The other, I forgot one part. I'll bring it up here. The way the code is written now, it says that between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., the heavier vehicles can park on the street. And I think whoever, our forefathers were that wrote that law had in mind, for goods and services to be rendered to the community, your oil deliveries, your Amazon, FedEx deliveries, and things like that. But I think it's kind of abused when you wake up on a Sunday, you come home from church on a Sunday morning, and you got a 25,000-pound flatbed truck parked in front of your house. Now, legally, they can park there because it's 10 o'clock, you come home from 8:30 Mass, but nobody likes it. And, so
Well,
that's
yeah.
part-
Thanks for the comments. We'll have some more discussion when we consider the resolution, at that point in time.
Right.
Mr.
Yeah.
Bill, did you want to?
I just had a question. You mentioned that OTRs have been issued on this. Obviously, there's been a violation present.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So if the violation's been present and OTRs have been issued, what has been the disposition of the OTRs?
Well, the response was that they had taken the position that they had not exceeded the weight, and the position was that, we needed to weigh the trucks in order to establish the violation.
So did this end up in court?
That one did not. There was one previously. The person who's the defendant in this particular case had actually lived at another address in the town as a tenant, and that one was litigated in court and ultimately was dismissed.
This is not an issue that is unique to our town. I've looked into this. There are tow trucks parking all over Dutchess County in residential areas. This is an ongoing issue that has been debated on both fronts. In fact, I heard earlier today that there are some municipalities that consider tow trucks exempt because they're emergency vehicles.
That's one of the things that's amended in the code. And, for purposes of vehicle and traffic law, a tow truck is only considered to be an emergency vehicle when it is responding to a scene. So under the provisions of vehicle and traffic law, after the car is loaded or if it's not responding, it's not considered to be an emergency vehicle. So once the tow truck is loaded and it then leaves the scene to go to the yard or wherever it's going, under the VTL, it's no longer considered to be an emergency vehicle.
So the
Right.
proposed local law has a definition of emergency vehicle which excludes tow trucks unless they're doing that, which Jim just said, under the vehicle and traffic safety law.
And if
tow
they're
truck
parked in a driveway, obviously they're not responding to the
Right.
scene.
is defined as a hazard vehicle, then not an emergency.
Right, I don't agree that it's an emergency vehicle. However, I have heard from other municipalities that the tow trucks are there for the purposes of being on standby, for being called out in the municipality. And the argument being made is that if a roadway is obstructed and the individuals don't have access to the tow truck, it delays the obstruction, therefore it's an exemption in some municipalities for that purpose. Let me just say this, I don't agree that there should be a tow truck sitting next to your, in a residential area that's causing an impact on you. But my question would be, and I looked back on your thread of emails, this goes back 3.5 years, and this has been something that the gentleman has been vocal about and documented such over a 3.5-year period. My question is, why did it take this long to get to this
I believe
identified?
this is the third amendment to the code
Yes,
Okay, so.
on this particular topic.
right.
So we need to make sure also that we're not, quote unquote, singling out or discriminating against tow truck operators, because we had an issue here in this town where a piece of legislation was proposed and the whole room was full of tow truck operators because they felt that they were being discriminated against. So the reason why this was tabled previously, and I didn't know you were here, if I had known you were here, I would have asked for, to yield the floor to you to speak about this. I want to make sure if we're passing a law that's not going to need to be amended again. This is the third time that this has been looked at, and, we need to make sure that this is something enforceable. Because I would argue, speaking to law enforcement partners that I work with, they're not going to enforce a zoning issue. It's not a crime.
And so for purposes of that, the parking on private property, That is not typically something that we would do with the sheriff's department. The issue was, we have two provisions in our code, one regarding parking on private property, and then the second one is parking on a street in a residential district. So the sheriff's department would have jurisdiction over that issue, which is overnight parking on a street in a commercial district, or in a residential district. With respect to the parking on private property, that would be that would be a zoning violation based on, a complaint from a neighbor would be used as a supporting deposition, and then that would be how it would go into court. And Mr. Conti had supplied supporting depositions, and they were supplied on the order to remedy notice of violation, and then we got one was the defense was raised that they were in fact an emergency vehicle. We changed the code with respect to that. Then the next time came back, it was actually parked on the street, and the sheriff's department raised the issue about registered versus gross vehicle weight. So, this has been, an issue. But with respect to kind of, if you go back and put it into the general context, in a residential neighborhood where it's zoned residential, as a general principle, you cannot have commercial vehicles parked on a residential property. As a rule, that would be considered to be operating a commercial business in a residential district. So the town had enacted a provision where it authorized a person who owned a commercial vehicle that was, in essence, a lighter commercial vehicle, not a large dump truck or something like that. It was, the current code provision was 8,000 pounds. And that's actually, so what's in the code is an exemption to permit the parking of a commercial vehicle in a residential district. So, but for that section, a person could not park a commercial vehicle on a residential lot. And so this was drafted as an exemption to the general principle that you can't park a commercial vehicle in a residential district on a residential lot. However, here, so for purposes of tow trucks, they're really treated as all the other commercial vehicles would be, whether it would be, a bulldozer, or whether it would be a delivery truck, or, something of that nature. So tow trucks aren't being singled out. They're just being, in essence, treated like all of the other commercial vehicles in the town. There's a second issue regarding, the ownership of the vehicle. So there's two components to this exemption. One, it has to be owned by, the vehicle has to be owned by the owner of the property, or a tenant or occupant of the property. And then the second thing is the weight. So it's a very limited exemption.
So David, does this gentleman live in an R40 or an R80? Do we know what the zoning is? Which street do you live on, sir?
I'm not familiar with this.
Kendall Drive.
Kendall's,
Drive.
relatively, I think they're either acre or 1 acre lots.
Quarter.
My
Quarter acre,
acre.
aren't they?
Yeah, it's quarter acre.
Quarter acre.
quarter acre lots.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's not,
It's our, I
think
believe
they're
it's our
quarters.
2040.
are they 20/40? Then they're quarter and half acre lots.
Yeah, I think,
What's that?
R20.
It's it's R20. So here, this is the argument I was making at the last meeting. So people that live in an R20 zone are gonna be more
Kendall's
impacted by these
okay.
types of things than people that live in an R80 or a, 1 or 2 or 3 acre, zone. My argument at the last meeting was perhaps we need to look at this from the size and dimensions of the property and the zoning. Because a person that has a 3 acre parcel, I know people that have 3 acre parcels that have all sorts of things on their property. And we start getting into this fine line of overreach when we start telling someone with, 3 acres of property where you can't even see their house, that they can't have, something on their property versus, if it has no impact on their neighbors, versus an individual that's in an R20/40 that is literally 20 feet off of the side of someone's house.
Yes.
We could certainly look into that. What
It's
Jim is
R40?
What Jim is talking about is not new zoning,
Yeah.
or not new provisions. What I'm saying is, what Jim is talking about is not new, it's been in the code for a long time,
Basically, since it was adopted.
but we can certainly look at what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right, but clearly, we have not been enforcing, or this has not been enforced, because you can drive through my ward and pick 10 of these things out right now.
No,
So,
but I think in this particular case, Bill, we have tried to enforce it, and it was at the recommendation of Captain Stewart, Sergeant, that we make this change to the code so that they could enforce it, particularly on the streets, right? Because they don't have the ability to weigh the vehicles at that point of time.
So right now, we're just amending the law, adding registered weight. We already have it as is, we're just adding that verbiage into it, correct?
We're adding that, we're adding the definition of emergency vehicle,
Okay.
and we're changing the 8,000 pounds to 9,500 pounds, assuming you adopt
Because
this.
that was the request
Right.
vis-à-vis the SUVs.
Right.
Right.
And
Right.
our definition, the proposed definition of emergency vehicle adopts the definition from the vehicle and traffic law. Because before, we didn't have a definition of emergency vehicle.
Since we have a resolution, let's come back to some further discussion so we can keep Mr. Conte from standing up there all the time. And if we have any other comments on the public, meeting, but then we can come back to the discussion.
yeah, the reason why I expanded upon this with you standing
Yeah, sure.
here is because of the amount of research and the amount of, I was just, I don't know how I felt when I saw this was a 3.5-year email thread that I was looking at. And this is the first I'm hearing about this. You're talking like 3 council people ago over in Ward 3. So our apologies for not having a more definitive approach. And certainly I will, tonight, be happy to be part of the beginning of a solution. But I do want to make sure that we explore the zoning approach also down the road. I know we need to find
No, I
a
think
solution
we
here
can
tonight,
certainly do
but
that.
thank you for being patient.
Okay, thank you very much for your
Thank
time.
you. Thank you, John, and thank you to our neighbors, for coming out. And you may stay around. The resolution, I think, is, it's the first one on the resolution, so you may stay around for that. Hopefully not too long before we get to that. Any other comments? Jessica? Okay.
I don't usually speak during this portion, but I wanted to take this opportunity to make a short statement on some of the changes that have happened in the recreation budget, as well as what I'm hoping we can accomplish with future changes, since the resolution for the budget is on tonight. So, for a little bit of background, since 2014, it's been my goal to revitalize struggling programs, get our existing events to reach their full potential, and substitute programs that were a drain on funds for those that would be a better source of revenue, as well as tap into some underutilized avenues of revenue. So what's happened in 5 years? Half of the programs offered by the Recreation Department fill and require a wait list. Camp enrollment has stabilized, and the financial deficit of the program has been decreased by thousands of dollars. Facility use revenue has risen by $10,000, and public events that used to attract about 100 people now bring in several hundred people. We've also added new programs, events, and activities to the senior center, which has put attendance on the rise. So what comes next? Well, we know what the people have been asking for. We talk to them every day. They've been asking for better access to parks, upgraded park facilities, activities geared towards those with special needs, events, activities, and programs geared towards adults, more whole family activities and events, activities geared towards more active seniors, and more activities for seniors in general. So, success in providing the community with the improvements that they desire has multiple factors involved, including paid manpower, increases in revenue to offset taxpayer burden, volunteer support, and then ultimately bringing awareness to the fact that these improvements have been made. So I'm sure by now you've figured out that I'm requesting that the lines removed with the passing of the preliminary budget be reinstated, with the modification of one of them tacked on to the end, to help us increase services to our residents, as well as take the steps to ensure their success. All of the proposed items and initiatives contained in the packet I provided several weeks ago, which everyone has new copies of tonight, it's the same thing, were crafted with the public's requests in mind, as well as in accordance with the Parks and Recreation mission statement adopted by this board, and also taking into consideration what you probably know is my education and training in child and adolescent development. So every single one of these things become possible with the hiring of additional support staff as requested in the budget that I had submitted. And for the record, I just would like to make a quick review of the items proposed that are possible with this additional support staff. So I'm not going to go through the full summary that's in the packet, just the bullet points. Additional events and programs include a Harvest Fest, an International Food Fest, quarterly art exhibits, an expansion of the outdoor movie program, evening wellness and education programs for adults, a special needs activity group, local senior day trips, the resurgence of the senior yard sale, an expansion of the senior citizen craft program, movie program, and special days program, a health and wellness fair, a special needs community fair, a veterans appreciation barbecue, a multicultural dance class, and a pet expo. Those are just the program improvements. So what steps do we take for that success? These are also included in those proposals. Educational and on-the-ground community outreach concerning the benefits of outdoor activity, as well as recognition of people exhibiting model behavior, embarking on a 2-year formal needs assessment to keep engaged with the wants and needs of our community to enrich their lives, a volunteer recruitment and internship program to support our progress, quarterly open senior and recreation forums, direct advertising through townwide senior mailings, participation in community events that will allow us to advertise our programs and services to the community, monthly senior and recreation television programs, and video commercials for all recreation and senior programs. Therefore, to achieve those goals, I ask that the town board reinstate lines A7020.108 at $31,000 and line A7620.102 at $15,000. Also in the budget spreadsheets that I gave you, there are increases in revenue based on numbers that have come in more updated than what I had in the past, as well as the revenue that would be generated through some of these additional programs. I have it on paper, so I'm just going to kind of give it the layman's terms names for it. So for our Parks and Recreation programs, I'm proposing a revenue increase from $15,000 to $25,000. We're already at 19 for this year. Facility use fees, increasing that to $13,000. We're already there. And the other cultural and rec income would remain at $8,000. All right. So lastly, I ask that line 7020.109A be reinstated with the reduced amount of $11,500 with the revised purpose of increasing weekend park access to all facilities through the opening and closing of gates and bathroom facilities, as well as intermittent trash removal and litter pickup, and also being the liaison between the recreation department and paid rentals of our facilities. Following the approval of the new park rules, which in one form or another we know will make it through, couple changes, but for the most part it will make it through. A promotional push will take place to alert the community to the new and more accommodating procedure to rent our facilities with the intention of increasing use and revenue. All right, so the numbers. The budget impact of adding these services back in while still retaining some of the cuts that were made in the last round. We will be receiving and able to accomplish all of these things with a budget that is $12,600 less than the 2019 recreation, senior, and camp budget. So again, I request that the board consider reinstating those budget lines because, as I'm sure you can see, we will be doing a lot more
So you said
with
that, you
less.
said that basically you're going to be able to spend $12,000 less than what you
Correct.
spent this year and do the same thing. So I guess my question is, why weren't we able to initiate these programs this year if we had the money to do that this year?
Because of the manpower, these things are being accomplished through the hiring of 3 additional staff members to be able to be the support staff and able to accomplish this.
Mike, to answer your question,
Yeah.
as you recall, I think all the board members recall, is that we had, I think, a $60,000 line for the senior director.
Yeah.
And so I believe what Jessica's proposing
She's
is
reallocating the money.
reallocating the money
Yeah.
to
So we
some other
could, we
people.
could certainly keep it in that same position if we
Yeah.
wanted to as well.
Yeah,
and
so
still
I think
I
that's
don't-
what, is that
same
correct,
program.
Jessica?
That
What's
is
your-
correct. I don't think that it would have the same impact to the community services as splitting it to these targeted lines would. These are lines that will allow us to directly implement these programs. Having that $60,000 senior position does put oversight, but it doesn't put people on the ground to make these things happen.
Have we cut programs that have not been beneficial?
We have.
How many have we cut?
Well, I'll take it from the 5-year perspective. We used to have a bus trip program that was a town-wide bus trip program, not the senior citizen bus trip program, that after a study I completed, it determined we had taken a $35,000 loss over 5 years. I cut that. I cut that one. We have increased through like pickleball. Our indoor soccer program took the place of our twirling program that we used to have, and our indoor soccer program is on a wait list. We have implemented what we like to call our beginner basketball course to replace our summer basketball course. The summer basketball course was not a financially viable program. The beginner basketball course is on a wait list. So in terms of cutting programs, with the exception of the bus trip, there hasn't been a program that we've cut that hasn't been replaced by something else.
Well, I still think we could have probably initiated some of these programs this year with the budget we had, but that's just my position. I'll leave that alone.
Okay, well, we can.
Yeah, we're gonna get into
discuss-
this.
We're
I
gonna
mean,
get into this.
Let me just
Yeah, we'll
say,
discuss it.
real quick, since I was the member that recommended cutting them, don't take it personal.
No, I know.
We had to trim back for the purposes of adopting a preliminary budget, okay? It's not final. We still
No.
have some much deliberation to do. My approach to budgeting is to peel back everything, right?
Yep.
To the essential level, look at revenues, right? And then determine what we can afford. And Supervisor Thurston shares much of that strategy. We were successful last year. I believe we'll be successful this year in being able to preserve the essential services, but be able to expand upon certain things. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't rule out all of these things at this point, but I think that we need to understand specifically and globally where we are dollars and cents wise before we adopt that final budget, which is why we're going to discuss the possibility of pushing that final vote off until Monday so that we have a little more time to crunch some numbers over the weekend, specifically for me. I know I need to dig into some things over the weekend, and I'm sure my colleagues also would appreciate a few more extra days since the way it fell this year, everything happened at once in November.
And I think also share with the colleagues, some of the work we've been doing
Yeah.
since our last meeting too, which
Yeah.
Frederick and I and others have been looking into.
So I wouldn't rule out your initiatives yet. We're not there
No.
yet, but I
No,
do
and-
appreciate the additional information.
But I would like to say
No
that,
problem.
Jessica has put a lot of effort into this.
Sure.
And has communicated with me her ideas, and from, I think, all that I've accumulated from every one of you as we're canvassing and talking with seniors and other people in communities, she has tried to address those, issues. So I think
Yeah,
further discussion.
I agree
we can-
that we definitely need more programs.
Yeah.
The way to go about it by just hiring additional people may not be the
Right, so we
optimal way to do it, but
discuss.
we can discuss that.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Jessica. Yeah, thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments for the public portion of the meeting?
I'll make a motion to close the public portion.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any nays or abstentions? The motion passed. So now we'll go into our discussion, section of the meeting, and this is really an update on a number of issues and items of concern and what has been raised since our last board meeting. So I'm asking Mr. Moot to come up and, well, you can sit there. If the microphone, make sure you pull the microphone in front of you. On some areas that the board has taken a strong interest in, active role, such as Old Hopewell Road, Old Hopewell Commons, a couple of these. So, Mr. Moot's going to give us an update on where we are and what still needs to be addressed.
Thanks, Supervisor. Good evening, everyone. So this is a county highway improvement project. It's being funded by the federal government administered through New York State DOT.
And this is Old Hopewell Road.
This is Old Hopewell Road, County Route 28, from Route 9 to just beyond All Angels intersection. This is actually just a colorized graphic. It's pretty simplified. The county is going to basically improve the road profile. There's areas where they intend to cut 3 to 5 feet out of some of the elevated rises.
3 to 5 feet, you said?
3 to 5 feet, not the entire road section. So the county's going to incur costs out of their own funding to replace some of the town utilities that fall within their scope. So that would include some minor drainage improvements, new hydrants, there's some water main replacement, which will benefit the town.
Excuse me for interrupting,
Sure.
but you just had a discussion with them, what, yesterday? Or-
Correct, we
so
met
mention to
with
the board
county,
what you did.
correct, we met with county DPW yesterday to get an update on the project, and we met on site this morning with Central Hudson. So, basically, the way the state DOT administers projects, there's an item called a betterment. And a betterment is basically an improvement that has to be funded by the town. It's outside of the scope that the county is going to fund as the basis of their standard project. So it's kind of like an extra improvement, if you will. And so we've studied the area, and based on the water and sewer district boundaries, there are gaps in utilities along this corridor. And so now is the time to consider addressing the gaps. I don't know that I have a very clear diagram, but I have a water map. You're gonna have to zoom in on the same area there. But based on the district boundaries, there are certain areas along that stretch where there are no water mains, and there are certain areas along that stretch where there are no sewer improvements. So
And I would add, and correct me if I'm wrong, but based on comments from some residents in those areas of gaps that have had septic and water wells, actually some of those are going to be covered over by the proposed road and easement. So there are some issues relating to residents continuing to obtain water and sewer. So that's part of what we're trying to address or look at.
correct. So this is just an example. I think that's the water map, but you can see the district boundaries and where there's no color, and then there's other areas converse to that relative to sewer. So based on the county discussion, it's probably going to be a 2-year construction project. Central Hudson has actually started last week with some of their gas main relocation. We have submitted our drawings to the DOT for their review and approval. We have to yet submit to the health department and sort of legally fill in some of these areas where there's no district boundaries, but the intent is, being that it's a 2-year project, the county has a standing rule that when there's new road improvements, you can't disturb the road section within 5 years of that improvement. So if we kind of look forward for 7 years, we're not going to really have the opportunity to do anything.
So just to explain on this map, the white area is one of the gaps,
That's a
correct?
gap, correct,
Yeah,
yeah.
Is the gap that we have along that road.
And then there's the yellow for
Yeah,
the sewer.
yellow is
so,
a gap.
yeah. So
And I think, Bill,
our,
you're probably familiar with, some of that.
Yeah, I always ask, how that happened. Obviously, when they drew the district lines for water and sewer, for whatever reason, those parcels were left out. I'm sure there was great debate on why that occurred. So then the question would be, what do we do? Do we take it upon ourselves to include those parcels?
So basically, most of the gaps, a lot of the gaps existed because the water and sewer improvements in the town were takeovers of privately constructed water and sewer
Okay.
systems. And many of them were done not as actually special districts, but special improvement areas. The reason why they were taken over as special improvement areas is that does not require, that doesn't have a referendum component to it. So many times these systems, at least on the sewer side, were under DEC consent orders. So work had to be done. And so the sewer systems primarily were done as improvement areas. The water districts were typically, some of them were done as water districts. And so, the gaps existed because mostly the private water companies went in for a particular subdivision. Rockingham subdivision had a water company, Oakwood Knowles had so all of the individual subdivisions were built with their own water,
Right.
water and/or sewer treatment plants. And that's kind of how this kind of hodgepodge was created. So from what Tim was saying, I did some research, and I also spoke with Doug Goodfriend, bond counsel. There is a mechanism in the special district law, which is, I was not aware of until I was doing this research. And I asked Doug if he had ever come across the provision, and he had not. But there's a specific authority in the special district law that authorizes a town to lay water and sewer mains in a highway that's either being constructed or reconstructed. And the cost of those improvements can be a town charge, which would be an A-fund charge. And then at such time as the district is extended to serve the properties in the gaps, that charge would then be assigned to the district extension. It's similar to surplus capacity, which is another provision that's in the special district law.
Jim, in that case, can that be done then through a ban process?
We would
That's
bond
what we
it, right.
bond it, or maybe do the ban
And then what would
first?
happen is you would issue the bonds, and then, the debt service would ultimately be taken over by the district extension at
Okay.
such time it was done.
Okay.
So one of the things here is so some portions of this work will be to loop the existing system that's out there. So there's some benefit to primarily the United Wappinger Water District. You don't really have a loop per se in a sewer system. Some portion of the cost would be associated with the United Wappinger Water District as a whole, and then some portion of the cost would be associated to the district extensions to make it more affordable. We're looking at that, so we've got some decent cost estimates. I think the one thing that I think we're looking at now, in essence, is how to break down the parcels. It's easy to do the parcel on each side of Old Hopewell Road. That's not in the district, but the question is, is there a potential to service something beyond that? So that's really where we stand as far as that portion of it.
so it's kind of complex from an engineering standpoint. We know where the gaps are. We need to integrate our design with the road design. And now, as of today, we're integrating it with Central Hudson's design for the best alignment, the best fit for all. the project was originally gonna be bid and bids are gonna open this week, but it's still held up in the DOT's court based on right-of-way and review and comment. So I think, I've asked the county to provide a highly detailed kind of outline and a schedule. And, you know, everybody wants to know how much is it gonna cost. We created an engineer's estimate based on the work. The wild card is rock removal, and there is a lot of rock along this profile, and the sewer is gonna end up being pretty deep. So we're kind of concerned, you know, about trying to actually pin down a hard number, and we won't be able to do that honestly until, number one, the bids come in, and then number two, we get a better idea of the field conditions.
And we are also looking at possible grant funding. I even met with Congressman Maloney's staff yesterday to talk about this and other projects. But I would add, you know, that at our request, myself, but because of the board's input, is that we have specifically requested, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a, detailed schedule and then a, regular report, whether or not it's weekly or bi-weekly from them,
Right.
to avoid some of the problems that we had in Myers Corner. Also, we've expressed our displeasure with respect to the contractor on that Myers Corner project. And the course of the bidding, hopefully that some of the issues aren't repeated that we found earlier. So according to what Mr. Moot said, is that DPW is, very much taking into consideration, respecting our request to do a better job. And then last, I've asked the CPL to kind of keep an eye on this project as it goes along so that we have our engineer on the ground, sort of like we've done with other developments, Old Hopewell Commons and so forth, but on a bigger scale.
And
Correct.
because it's being federally administrated, there is a pretty stringent construction administration protocol that has to be followed. And so that's another piece that fee-wise may need to be negotiated with the county. They are gonna look at this, the town scope as a standalone item, separate from their work, but they have to go to bid for a consultant to administer their work. So we'll get a cost to administer this piece as well, and then we can revisit that if needed. So, and it will be, we're trying to give you as much information in advance notice. However, once the bids come in on the county side, it's gonna be a really fast turnaround. Like the county, because of the whole tree and the bat thing, it's November 1st and March 30th. So we're already talking about the early part of January is when they want to award. And at that time, we're.
But construction, probably March,
Construction
April
with
timeframe?
tree removal will have to be, the trees just have to be laying down, but by the end of March. So.
Yeah.
And I imagine Central Hudson will continue working now till, the
So
weather.
what, for our residents, what you're seeing right now is Central Hudson repositioning the telephone, lines, utility lines that they have responsibility, as well as the gas mains, correct?
So the VMS boards that are out there right now, the variable message sign boards that are just kind of plopped in random locations, I've already mentioned this to Commissioner Bob Balkine. I don't know, I assume that's Central Hudson's contractor that did that.
I imagine so. 'Cause,
I mean, they're not even set up properly, number one. There's no outriggers down. The signs aren't cranked up. And it basically says, Old Hopewell Road, construction, find alternate route.
Yeah.
There is no alternate route for people that live in Hopewell. And between Myers Corners Road and Old Hopewell Road, there are 40,000 cars a day. That is the busiest section on Route 9 in the town of Wappinger. And many of those cars that are southbound on 9 are going onto Old Hopewell Road.
Correct.
And it's not like you can take Myers Corners Road to get to Hopewell very easily. It's not like you can take Route 52 to get to Hopewell very easily. You can't shoot around McFarland Road, right? You can't take Myers to Losey and Spook Hill. So this is gonna be a real issue. Myers Corners Road, the goat trail, yeah, that's an issue, okay? But this, you're talking tens of thousands of cars that are gonna be backed out into the intersection if this is not handled properly. So,
And that's why we're putting
Right, I mean,
real attention on this.
ultimately, I don't know if there's another solution, because what they need to do is a pretty comprehensive project, but we just need to understand that we have two major intersections that are going to be impacted. The new intersection, which I think you're going to talk about next, where we're keeping an eye on the queue for the traffic light, hopefully, so that we don't have that backing up. I don't know how it's not going to back up once this construction starts. So this is something we need to kind of do our best as a town to convey information to the public, but ultimately, at the end of the day, we're not going to have a lot of control over this.
I'll convey that and the concerns back to Commissioner Balkine, because at the end of the day, it's really.
Well, I think also the board agrees, since I have had communication, I will send another letter, to really confirm this, and that we've, asked CPL to keep a close eye on that report to the board at almost, at our regular meetings,
And
regularly.
also, I think if we can have a line of communication with whoever the contractor is
Yeah,
working for Central
exactly.
Hudson, because that's the preamble to the whole thing, just like on Myers Corners Road. Central Hudson came through first and relocated their utilities. That's when people started noticing something was going on. As challenging as that project has been over there, there's significantly less vehicles
Exactly.
on that road. So my fear on Old Hopewell, if you're talking, 10,000 cars a day, whatever it is, it's probably close to that. Where are those vehicles, where do they go?
Right.
Do we need a detour in place ahead of time? Is there even a feasible detour, period, for people that need to get to Hopewell Junction?
That's right.
So, that being said, I just wanted to put it on the record that we are trying to be proactive.
Yep, exactly. And there's going to be a far greater impact on our town roads at all these variety of intersections.
Right, people trying to get around.
Trying to get around, and also the disruption to our own town roads as a result of the widening of the easements and so forth.
But at the end, ultimately, this needs to be done, I agree. Part of the improvement project that the county is doing is very important. They are doing their best to expand the shoulders.
Yep.
Right? And one of the biggest issues we have on Myers Corners Road is, the kids that come out of Ketchum that are walking down Myers Corners Road towards Route 9, those shoulders are not that wide. And I know, talking to Commissioner Balkine, that any of these improvement projects that they're taking on, they're making an effort to increase those shoulders to help facilitate pedestrians and bicyclists, because, as we know, it's not feasible to put sidewalks on all their county roads, right? So,
And also, there's going to be some turn lanes.
Right.
That they're designing in, that's going to help with the flow of traffic.
so at the end of
as
the
well.
day, in 2 years or 3 years or whenever it's done, it's gonna be improved, but the interim is gonna be a challenge.
Yep, agreed. Go ahead, Mr. Moon.
All right, so the next update then would be on the Old Hopewell Commons Road, which, if you back. So this was a last minute modification and misunderstanding or miscue between what was approved plan and what was being built as a plan. And my office provided this drawing, which kind of, I don't have my pointer, but the lower left corner there, basically, if you could zoom in on that corner, I think it'd be easier to see what we're talking about. But basically, they provided 2 turn lanes, one making a right-hand turn out of the exit, one is straight and a left-hand turn, with 1 entrance lane coming in. And I believe originally it was just 1 turn lane there.
Well, the plans that were signed by the planning board indicated this
Yes.
This configuration.
configuration. We'll just say there was a miscommunication between certain engineers, okay? And it ended up being built about 10 feet,
That's too
less than
narrow.
it should have been.
Yeah.
The planning board chairman, I have to give credit to, happened to see where the curbs were being put in and noticed that this was not proper, and the team here in the daytime was able to effectively stop the job and get them to correct it. The idea here is, this intersection is now going to be 400 feet west of the previous intersection of Sergeant Palmetier. And I know people in my ward are concerned about this. Ultimately, what we're trying to do here is follow the recommendations that have been echoed for years, which is separating that intersection, okay? You have Sergeant Palmetier, formerly Old Route 9, coming into an intersection with Route 9 and Old Hopewell Road. My concern primarily was the school buses from Evans that are inching out, coming out to Old Hopewell Road, trying to go south on Route 9 while somebody's making a right on a right arrow or a right on red, and you have a bus sitting there. That is a major hazard. This will move that traffic 400 feet to the west of that intersection, allowing for increased visibility. The traffic engineers agree that this is going to improve safety, right? And we have to just keep an eye on the timing of the traffic light to make sure that the queue is not going to back traffic up from 9 and Old Hopewell past this intersection. And there's 2 key hours that may happen, and we've discussed that, and I think we're going to be keeping an eye. Now, the only other variable here is the construction project on the east side of Route 9 that could inadvertently back traffic up because of that construction. So, you know, it's a multifaceted project here, but I think at the end of the day, it's going to improve the flow.
And so we've, been posting, the progress, the road closure information, trying to get as much information out there to the public so that they're aware of it, and we'll continue to do that.
When they put the barricades out on the old road, there was discussion about concrete barricades. Once the road is no longer being used on the old portion of Sergeant Palmetier, if they're going to put concrete barriers there, I would ask that there be reflectors on that, so that in the middle of the night, somebody coming home,
It's actually required by the highway law.
Okay, so so say you're facing north on 9, right? It's 2 in the morning, you get a green arrow, you're half asleep going home from work, and you go to make the hard right, and there's a barricade sitting there now.
Yeah,
Because the day before, when you went to work, it was open.
It requires a flashing light.
Okay, all right, good. So I just want to make sure, because
Signs that are gonna be up.
I see the sign, there is signage out there now, but I,
Discussed that, right?
yeah, that
There's
was
gonna be signs.
just the thought that you used to doing things every day for all these years, and all of a sudden, there's a barricade there.
That's right.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's gonna, there'll be a barrier at the end, at the south end, and then as the construction is taking place, there will be a barrier north of the construction, I guess, and south of Curry Lane.
Yes, Indian
Um,
Village.
Well, no, on
Curry on the north
Oh,
side.
on the north
on
side.
the north
okay.
side there. So, just south of Curry. So there'll be
Right.
access to Curry Lane. There'll be access to all the businesses along Route 9. It's just that this is the area where the construction will be take place during the closing. The idea is that, in order to, there'll be some grading and shimming of the pavement so that, there won't be any bumps or humps from the new section of road into the old section of road. So the construction is estimated to take approximately, 1 to 2 days, and then also at that time, they're going to be ripping up the pavement between there and Old Hopewell Road as well.
So a little bit later, we have 2 resolutions
We
that
have
will
2
address this.
resolutions. One is to conditionally accept the new road. The idea is that we would adopt a town board resolution ahead of time. That way, the idea is that we can do the closure and do the acceptance at the same time, so we have all the
Right.
paperwork in place. The resolution is to accept the road once the construction is completed. As I understand it now, basically, the construction has been completed except for that one section where there'll be shimming. And they're in the process of doing the as-built drawings for the road work. And then the second resolution is to abandon the property, the stretch of Sergeant Palmetier, which will be closed, back to the property owner. The town's reserving an easement because there's water and sewer lines and some utilities within there, so there's going to be a blanket easement reserved for underground utilities along that parcel.
Bill, will the park, be expanded any eventually?
So the idea, well, not expanded, but the idea was during the next phase of construction on that property, there would be better access to the parking area that would be, affiliated with whatever their project would be. So, we need to keep a close eye on that next phase.
Right.
To make sure that those stipulations are remaining.
Yep. So, and there's really, they can't build anything on it.
No.
Other than parking, so.
Yeah.
My office indicated by the end of the month that work should all be complete, so.
The other thing,
Go ahead, Bill.
there was some discussion in the emails about notifying the public safety agencies when this is going to happen. In other words, the state police and the ambulance,
Fire.
the fire district, if we can make sure that they're aware that quote-unquote local traffic only is going to be from November 15th to the 25th, I think it is, whatever the dates are.
I think I believe the notifications were made last Friday.
Okay.
But we can.
Just
check
confirm that they are in the loop on this, and then once we open it officially, let's make sure that we notify them that day, that, okay, today it's open. As you know, some, shifts will change, and they may not have worked 2 days ago, and they should be aware of it. So otherwise, I think we're working well as a team to get this done. This is a major adjustment to a town road, probably the most significant with the exception of the Adams project. So I think everyone is communicating properly, which is a good thing.
Now.
All entities involved.
Now.
I think, internally, we've been communicating well. There was some miscommunication externally with
Not
us.
on our, not
Not
on
Well,
ours.
that's been remedied.
Right,
now.
that's been remedied.
Does Old Hopewell Commons, when do they anticipate, they have COs on those units yet? Or
No.
when does that happen?
Yeah,
They-
we've had inspections, Bill, in the last day or two, and I don't believe any units passed. So there's still
Okay.
some issues there.
So,
And I spoke to their attorney today, and he, they're focusing on getting the road work done.
okay, so in other words, there'll be no CO issued on those multi-dwellings until after the road's done, correct?
Most likely.
Most likely,
yes.
that's the way it is now.
I mean, right now, the road, right now, you could get into those units right now, based on what.
But there are a number of
construction is.
issues with
Right,
those
there's
units,
other,
so.
right, other issues with the building.
that's
So we
what
just
we're
want to make
addressing.
sure that at all times there's access for emergency vehicles. So if there are, let me know if they're going to start occupying, because I want to make sure the emergency services know that they're starting to occupy.
Yeah, I'll let you know. I've been keeping in communication with our folks, both fire and general inspection.
And just for the record, the fire department did have a walkthrough on those units last week.
Okay.
And they're familiar with the layouts.
Good, okay. Tim, while you've been speaking, why don't you continue with the other two topics that we have with Wildwood and Chelsea?
Okay, so if we could
Just-
jump to Chelsea.
Yeah,
Water.
let's just go to that since you have the floor, so to speak.
So Chelsea Water, we had a resident open public meeting back in early September. You can just show the map if you want, Joe.
Map.
And, the issue is there was, we're looking at about 34 residential hookups between 2015 and 2018 that basically paid out of pocket for those expenses, which would be permits, water meters, labor, and materials for the hookups. Since then, the project's been sort of re-evaluated based on the amount of available funds, and then 2019, these same services have been fully funded through the project. So we're trying to work with DEP to submit a letter requesting reimbursement on behalf of those residents between 2015 and 2018. So we called a meeting here at Town Hall. Dan Michaud, who's the project manager for DEP, and a couple of their attorneys attended the meeting. We had a very good discussion and then laid out some groundwork on how to progress on this topic. Since then, we've worked with the town in assembling records and trying to get residents to basically provide backup for some of these costs that we can summarize in a letter and request back to DEP, which will probably precipitate a face-to-face meeting in New York City with
Right.
the representatives to be.
But as to the backup information, we've both gotten it from residents, and then also Tom Harvey has been doing some analysis as well. So
Correct.
we've been compiling,
Right.
Angela, a big database with respect to all the costs that we can get.
So I think there's still some residents out there that
Right.
haven't provided information, and while we're trying to keep the door open, we don't want to miss our window. So
If you would like,
Forward me those
Yeah,
names
that's
of
what I
those
was gonna
people. I personally will go
Yeah.
to them and
yeah.
speak with them in
Yeah.
whatever documentation
and I
you
spoke
have
with a
on
number
that,
before,
please.
but I think so you
And I
can
will
follow up.
personally go
Yeah.
there, please.
And then also, please follow up with respect to the one issue we talked about earlier today about the foundation issue.
Correct, so
You know,
there
with
is the one resident that
Yeah,
has,
still
he
haven't visited.
unfortunately has some personal
Yes, they're
Right.
aware.
things going on in
Yep.
his life.
so those are our two big open to-do list items that we look to hopefully resolve within the next couple weeks and get the ball back into DEP's court
Well, actually, I said that I wanted to get a letter out before Thanksgiving at the latest, right? And I think then get to Councilwoman, you know, that information so we can fill those in, you know, as quickly as possible.
Residents are.
Yeah,
Because they're very, you know, and rightfully so.
They're still very concerned, and
Right.
they're asking, and.
'Cause I wanna-
And I have told them that we have been working on
Yeah,
this.
we do.
Diligently, and I just like to keep them in the loop.
Right.
Okay.
And they have been coming in, I mean, it's been very
No, I
nice.
understand,
You know, they've been
I've spoken to
appreciative.
them too,
Yeah.
but I don't want them to think, you know,
That
we
it's
forgot
being
about
dropped,
them.
No.
right, sure.
Yeah,
Exactly.
so thank you very much to
Okay,
you,
you
and
got
to,
it.
honestly, thank you.
And then, so it's just got a housekeeping thing, and I know it didn't make the agenda for authorization, but there is a pending CO, that was the other letter, if you want to, I'll just quickly give you a summary. So, we tried to solicit residents ahead of the bid to get permission and interest to make the connections, and as it were, more people sort of came out of the woodwork and wanted to connect after the project was bid, which we anticipated, and structured the bid as such. So as of now, there's a pending change order for, I think it's 19,000.
Can you get another copy? I couldn't find it, you know, before the
Okay,
meeting, so
sure.
please get that to me somehow.
And it's not like critical that it gets acted on tonight, but it's just out there to say, since the bid, we've established 5 additional connections. It's a pending cost of 19,000 additional, and then there's a balance remaining in the second paragraph there. After the change order, we still have about 340,870 left in funding. There's still a handful of people, I think we have maybe 10 that have expressed interest. We haven't fully vetted what the quantities would be. And then there's also reserve funding for whatever potential reimbursement that gets authorized. So as of right now, we're in good shape. Again, as a result of the meeting with DEP, we did achieve a time extension verbally. We
Right.
provided them a contract amendment. I don't know that we got anything back though.
I haven't seen anything back yet, but.
No.
But
Nothing
they
back
were,
yet.
they were okay with June 1st, 2020, I think it was.
Right.
Yes.
I think that was
Yes.
something that we discussed.
Now, so there is, Joe, if you could go back to the map. So as far as the funding that was available, the area that's shaded in red, we did not have any funding to do that area.
Correct.
So that area was prioritized last in the
Right.
in the schedule, so, you know, and I don't believe all of the properties in the other, the greens and the yellows and the green, the orange, and the blue, not everyone has connected or
No.
expressed an interest, so, you know, based on the balance that's there, the balance is available for certain of the properties in the yellow, orange kind of color, but after that, we're out of funding.
And we've had several residents on SkyTap that have indicated an interest to connect, but they
Right.
were willing to pay for it, you know, themselves, because they really want to have that connection, so we're working on that and all of this, you know, together. And I would say that CPL has been really doing a good job of collecting it all and being diligent in it, so I know it seems slow, but we want to be comprehensive.
Well, we want to do it right. It's
Yeah.
already caused hardship and
Mhm.
anger and angst.
Absolutely.
Because it was not handled right from prior.
And the intention is
So-
to submit the total package, and then we'll negotiate with them to
Right.
see what, you know, we'll be able to negotiate for the residents.
And again, thank you for everything you guys are doing.
Based on the conversation, I think it's very unlikely that DEP will pay later.
Well, but we'll make a
We'll
valiant
certainly
effort,
make it-
right? You know,
Right.
it's what we're going to do.
You know,
You gotta try, right? I mean,
Yep.
you can't lose by, you know,
No,
not trying,
that's right.
so,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Tim. And then
And then the
Wildwood.
last one would be Wildwood. So, Wildwood, we've been talking about several meetings. We're working off a to-do list from EFC to secure the 2.5 million in grant funding. So the two larger items that were remaining were the execution of the environmental assessment form, which they wanted the full part to sign, which we worked with Jim and got the resolutions and supervisor assigned. So that actually, we emailed and got confirmation from EFC today, so they have that. So that
Okay,
was like a good stepping stone. So the last piece, which is, you know, the big piece, was to generate the map plan report, which we do for all standard sort of projects relative to water and sewer. And so this map shows, you know, the Wildwood district, which is sort of like the pink area there. It currently flows to a pump station, which is a little, or I'm sorry, a wastewater treatment plant, which is that little blue dot there. And then that gets treated and then discharged to the lake.
And that's basically down in the Quiet Acres area, right, of the town? Where the pump, where the plant is, that flows then into the creek.
Right. So then separately, and just for this discussion, the lower blue area is Wood Hill Green, which is actually another smaller development on the village side. They too go to a small wastewater treatment plant, which is that blue dot there. So both of those are pretty much defunct and have seen their life expectancy and no longer meet regulations by DEC.
And we've received notices
We
from
have received a notice of violation, and based on our efforts to move forward with EFC and secure this grant, part of that grant is to establish a timeline, and that's really what DEC wants to do, is precipitate a timeline through the notice of violation. So we've pretty much contained this project through our efforts of securing this grant, but we really need to get it across the finish line. So the scope is to basically convert back to the Wildwood area, to convert the upper blue dot basically to a pump station and provide infrastructure that would, it's the brown line there coming down the page, and go through Wood Hill Green and tie back in to the village system, which ultimately goes to Tri-Muni. So that in essence is the first part of this project. Wildwood is its own district, and because it's its own district, it basically keeps us from having to go to audit and control.
Yes.
And so we, in our map plan and report, we have to estimate this project, the project costs, soft costs, all in number, and then apply the grant money to that. And I think the core of it is, Joe, if you could go to the report, to the summary page. I think it's gonna be like your third page maybe. My eyes aren't that good, but- So this is the summary page, which, you know, is sort of like an executive summary, but the third paragraph down is the core of us boiling down the project costs. And if we look at the project and we incorporate the grant amount, it basically boils down to a $349.04 user cost, benefit user cost relative to this project improvement. That would be, though, in addition to their existing O&M cost of $547.88. So that basically, you know, because we don't have to go to audit and control, I mean, it's relatively close to that threshold anyway, even though we don't need to recognize that. But that's truly like the user cost, if you add those two together, which I didn't, but that's the gist of it. If we don't have the grant and we looked at the same project scope, the benefit user would be $581.73. Now this,
Which we have to do because we're under
Correct.
notice to remedy the situation, and we can't rebuild a plant, you know, there, so we have to bring it into Tri-Muni.
and the 349.04 would be relative to this 30-year note as part of the contract cost. Now, there's a lot of moving parts to this. Again, this is all based on our estimate. It's based on the town getting the grant. And it's the first phase, if you will, which is strictly town infrastructure. The intent is, like, part one is get the town infrastructure in. Then that opens the door to allow the village of Wood Hill Green to tie in. So there, not only is that like sort of capital funding source with that, there's also two other grants that have been
Correct.
applied.
Yeah.
So all these grant costs, which we should find out early December,
Early December, correct.
so
Yeah.
Can further reduce that.
it
you know,
could
is-
further
is our
reduce
plan.
that. That's the point.
Yeah.
So you're saying that the annual increase is $349. What's the price before the increase?
Currently, they're paying $547.88, so you combine those two.
That, I mean, we're gonna have a lot more discussions about this. That is a significant
Yeah,
impact
we know that.
on a resident.
And like I said, we're trying to get other, grant funding. The problem is, Bill, we're going to be under, order, which incurs $37,000 in fines each day that we, violated. So we have an urgency, but we have applied for 2 other grants, as Tim said, to further reduce this. And also some additional costs that, would be perhaps picked up by Woodhill Green and the village.
I mean, I
So
understand.
we're still working on that.
I mean, I understand that, the DEC is telling us that we need to do this, and there could be fines associated with that, but, a resident, seeing an increase like that,
No, we're well aware. That's why
Well,
we're
they're not gonna be
briefing. and-
happy.
yeah.
well, not gonna be happy, it'll
It'll
be,
be-
No.
that's
It's
not an
awful.
option, in my opinion. I don't know how we can even do that in good faith, to be honest with you. There's gotta be other options before we even get to that point, because it's not something I will support, given a, $1,000 sewer bill.
So this is for purpose of briefing and let you know that that's what we're looking into, and it's still a work in progress, but this is for full disclosure, what we have at this point. We've been fortunate to get at least 2.5 million, and we're working on more.
Sure. No, we're facing some difficult infrastructure issues, and this is one of them.
Yeah, this is.
Well, and, I don't know how, in going back and looking, Wildwood really has not had any capital costs associated with the district for many years now. Whereas, United Wappinger Sewer, you have the O&M charges and you have, capital, which is associated with that. So, really, Wildwood's been fortunate in the recent years because, they haven't, it would be interested to see how this sewer district compares to the others in the town. Because I think, they're probably paying quite a bit less than United Wappinger Sewer. You could also compare them to see how they stack up against Fleetwood and Watch Hill, because I think these costs are relatively low, and also we're going to have to be looking at a very similar situation in the case of Midpoint Park.
So, and I would add, Bill, that in, the initial briefing that we had as the board as we've been going along this, CPL has done a really great job in reducing what was the preliminary cost, estimate from 6 million down to where we are at this point. So it's still a work in progress, but they've spent a lot of effort to, reduce, the impact. So we're still working on it, but this is
Yeah.
the latest.
I understand it's a working progress, but again, from day one, I've said, I want to see what the end impact's going to be on the resident.
Yeah, that's what we've been doing.
Which is what we're looking at here. Councilman Cosmas and I ran into a couple that live at, Regency at Wappinger, and they're paying $200 per quarter for water. And they
I've
can't.
already addressed that. We're looking at
Yeah,
that.
I mean, we
we're
could sit,
addressing that.
we could sit here like we do and be diligent with our general fund budget and keep costs down for the residents to $1.93 per thousand, and have the average resident pay $500 to $600 a year in town taxes and be proud of that. But what I'm starting to see here in recent years are these sewer and water expenses creeping up and creeping up and creeping up, and we really need to keep our eye on the ball, because it's
But in all
not.
defense, we've inherited an antiquated, system that we've been trying, this board has tried to, I think, very well, address. And
No, I
getting the
understand that.
funding and all that, Bill. So
Listen, I'm not faulting the board, but we need to understand that residents
We do.
are looking at impacts from a
We
dollar.
well, you don't
cent
need to
perspective.
lecture us. We
I'm
well
not-
understand that.
I'm not lecturing you, but please understand my point.
You are lecturing.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
I'm trying to provide some perspective here to the town board that may not have the 14 years' experience that I have when we used to have low sewer and water rates. We don't have low sewer and water rates anymore. And when I see a presentation that's telling me we're going to find this great solution for $1,000 a year for sewer, that's not a great solution. I don't think that's an option. Whether we have to look at consolidating the United Sewer District with this particular project, whether we need to look at expanding the overall cost across a larger number of parcels, we can't be expecting folks that live in one area to pay $1,000 a year in sewer because nothing has been done with our sewer plant since 1968.
That's correct. And we have been presenting that to the board, Bill, as far as the bigger plan and picture as to consolidation of, districts and a variety of things. So that has been presented on a number of occasions, including CPL on a couple of occasions has presented, the bigger picture. So that is being looked at. This is just to give you a snapshot of where we are today compared to where we were when we were looking at $6 million, for this project.
But this is the first I've seen these numbers.
No,
They have not been presented before tonight.
we've had those numbers before, and I can.
These numbers?
These have been a refinement of what has been
But
earlier
I asked that
projected.
this report get distributed
Right.
to everybody before the.
Right, but the $349 increase versus the $581 increase at the bottom line, that's the first I'm seeing those numbers.
We've had larger numbers presented to the board. I'll show you, I'll give you the
It's getting
reports.
more and more refined.
Right, I mean,
This is more refined each time we do it.
I mean, the other thing, though, which I don't know, and it may be difficult to judge, once this is connected, and the existing treatment plan is abandoned, the O&M cost may decrease. So I don't know if we really looked at it on the O&M side. So this is really, these numbers are for the capital improvements, but what's proposed here is connecting this to Tri-Muni, and, in essence, the treatment facility is going to be the same for the United Wappinger Sewer District. So, but for the capital, in order to do that, we need to make the connection. So that's the capital costs here that are associated with it. But I think that, there may be some benefit on reducing the O&M cost, which I think we can talk to Mike Tremble about, and see, what the estimate would be, because we wouldn't be maintaining an entire plant, we're just running a pump station. So, and the treatment costs would be absorbed by the larger United Wappinger Sewer District. So that's the reason why this proposal is cheaper than the alternative, which was to replace the existing plant, which, the other option on the table was to replace the existing plant, which would have had a higher capital replacement cost, plus it probably would have had a higher O&M cost as well. So, based on the design options on the table, this was certainly the optimum. And then this also gives us the ability to further reduce the costs, or further spread the costs around with respect to Woodhill. And then there's some other properties that are in the area here. One of the discussions was for Quiet Acres, potentially as an expansion in the future. So it gives the town a lot more flexibility than it had prior to this project.
Do you have any ballpark ideas on, you've applied for 2 other grants, where those numbers would be?
Yeah, so the overall project was awarded under an intermunicipal grant, and, there's a cost share with the village, but that was $2.48 million. We also, through Scott Williams, applied for the WQIP, which is another $2.5 million. WQIP, I believe, only pays, though, for construction costs. I don't know that they would fund,
Right, I think so.
basically this side of the equation. And then there was a local government efficiency grant for about $400,000. So I kind of presented this, and you could sit and say, okay, well, if we add up all that, we had 6.2 million, and we're looking at, roughly 5.4 million in grants. That's if it all comes in. And, time we're trying to present like the worst case. I mean, I'd like to say it's gonna get a lot better, but I just, until, you know, maybe that's the idea, is we have to wait until,
Yeah,
you know, the grants are announced,
Right.
we could kind of keep shuffling numbers around, but until we really know where we land with all this grant money,
Right. That's right.
that's gonna be your
Well,
true
we know you'll
answer.
be diligent in doing what you can.
So this does not include Woodhill Greens, this proposal?
No,
No.
this is strictly just the town cost.
But again, part of the costs here are for infrastructure that Woodhill Greens would
Be able
be able to utilize.
Right.
And, you know, we can, and that's one of the discussions I'm having with bond council, as far as how we can associate that. One of the things that Woodhill Greens has, I guess, in looking from the grant prospect, is in a different demographic breakdown, and also income breakdown. So it allows, it increases the score from a grant funding point of view. So.
And as a shared, program with the village, it also helps us, capture that. So we've been working on that, diligently. And I think, not to prejudge, but based on our discussions with EFC, we have a higher degree of confidence of, getting awarded, that grant, because we had, qualified, and the last time we had missed the cutoff, because others had more money needs, so.
And that's where the WQIP,
Yes.
which they indicated we'd be taking the two
Right.
kind of defunct wastewater treatment plants that are discharging into the lake, those would now come offline, and all this would end up going to the river. So that's what they're seeing as the
Yeah.
big benefit
Big
to this.
Right.
Yeah, no, I agree. Those plants need to be decommissioned. But just as important to me is the overall impact on the resident.
Absolutely.
I appreciate
So,
the analysis.
You know, as to the creep in the costs in water and sewer, one of the things that happens is the costs creep up primarily as DEC comes with additional requirements. We've gotten additional filtering requirements at our water treatment facilities. We have to, have different levels of treatment and effluent capacity in the sewer plants. So each time there are new regulations that are put into place to to make the water cleaner or to, reduce discharges, that has a cost. And, where you're in a village or a city, that gets passed along in the tax bill. Overall, here, in a town, we have special districts, so that number gets assigned to the special
that,
district. So you see it more
Right.
directly, because there's a direct connection between, the increase in costs. And typically, some of it is on the O&M side, increasing the bill, but, a lot of it also is needed capital improvements. So it shows up on the capital portion of your tax bill. So.
Well, I agree. We just have to we don't see those numbers as closely until you start talking to someone.
Right.
We see, we adopt that portion of the budget, and generally speaking, there's not a lot of discussion about it because it's based on the expense within that district and based on, the cap costs and all that. But when you sit down at a coffee shop and residents are going out of their way to say, why is my water bill so expensive now? It's difficult to give them the same answer you just gave us.
I'll put it on a little card. You can hand it out.
Okay, thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next item, Jessica, briefly, to talk about the Rockingham soccer, as far as just a brief update. I know there's some other points that we want to address later on.
Absolutely. And then I'll just, since it's only a minor sneak preview discussion about Quiet Acres, if you don't mind, I'll tack that on to the end of this one, just so you don't have to hear me so much. So we've had some issues at Rockingham that have been brought to our attention by a resident in that neighborhood. It concerns that the soccer club is somewhat improvising their own system of lights out there, We don't have lights in the same way that we have lights at Robinson or Mart's. They are working to extend their play a little further into the fall season than they typically do. Apparently, this has caused an increase in traffic in that neighborhood in the evenings, and some of the residents are a little concerned about all of the on-street parking. Rockingham is a park that has parking towards the back, but a lot of people choose to utilize the street for parking. In addition, there are some issues with idling cars in terms of lighting and things like that. Now, after speaking with the resident who has these concerns, some of the things that he's indicated are that with these improvised lighting setups that they're doing out there at Rockingham, it's still not going past about 7:30 at night. A lot of it has to do with the fact that it's getting dark a lot earlier. And also, Rockingham is a park that's always been somewhat of an overflow soccer field, with Airport being the primary location for soccer. But as we know, and we've gone through half a dozen times, if not more, there are frequently drainage and other issues at Airport that do cause them to relocate to Rockingham. So that's the quick synopsis of this complaint. In terms of action moving forward, I do have some things that I would like to talk to you about. We have a contractual relationship with soccer, so they are best discussed in executive session. But that is the nature of the complaint of the resident.
Have you reached out to soccer and asked them about how they might be able to accommodate the situation so that the residents aren't as impacted?
I have not spoke to soccer because before I do, I would like to try to see if we can all be on the same page of a compromise. I spoke to the resident and mentioned a couple of things about, like, well, how about if this ends but this doesn't, to accommodate soccer and this, and he and a couple of the other neighbors seem quite firm on not making any accommodations for the needs of soccer. So that's why I'd like to talk about it with the board before I approach soccer.
And I was going to, I mean, not to talk about this tonight, but just to bring this to your attention, because we've discussed this before, that certainly other residents had questions about the signs, which obviously we want to have addressed at some point.
The park rule signs?
Yes, and
Yes.
also the conditions of the field and how we might be able to improve that as well. So that's something that
Yeah,
I
that's
want to
an
definitely keep on the
ongoing-
front burner to talk about at future meetings. Not necessarily at this point, but just
Yeah.
something to make sure that you address maybe at a future meeting.
And the park rule signs, along with the revamping of the park facility request paperwork, is on for the first meeting after the budget passes.
Okay.
Just to let us get through all this first.
So the December 9th
Yeah.
meeting, I
Gotcha.
plan to.
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to make sure we didn't
So,
forget about
so
thanks,
that,
Mike.
that part
Okay.
is all
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
And
'cause
air,
they still are asking about
No,
the
no.
sign.
yeah,
Absolutely,
yeah.
that's gonna be
It just, it got put on a little bit of hold so we could get through this, but it's still, it's all there. And in terms of Airport, there are at least 2 to 3 emails a week, as the supervisor and Steve Frazier can agree about
And you
Airport.
recall, CPL has
Yes.
done a study and had a preliminary proposal to how to relieve part of the issue, that, we, I think, need to, review again, and maybe on the 9th, Tim, you can report to us on that.
If I'm looking at this properly, this is not flooding, this is an actual pond.
Yeah, what,
So that's,
I was over there this weekend. What is that pond? What is that?
Steve would better answer. I believe it's a retention pond.
I don't know exactly what the intent was initially. Right now, it's nothing but a nuisance.
Right now, I mean, there's a fence that looks like it was put up 40 years ago that's half broken down. We have kids running all over the place out there. I sat there for about 20 minutes just watching everything the other day of how this goes down. You got kids running around through the mud, almost going into this pond, which is just a problem waiting to happen. The fence hasn't been maintained. There's a garbage can floating in the middle of the pond.
Oh, that's new.
I don't know if this was some sort of a viewscape thing that they had an idea back in the 70s.
I think it was a,
Yeah, and one of the things I think I
Yeah.
mentioned. to
Effluent pond.
Steve as well is that,
Sewer district, the old sewer district.
So that's the sewer pond that's in the middle of our park.
Yeah, and I
Yes.
think one of the things
Its
that-
current purpose is to attract geese.
well, I was gonna
That's
say
really
also, what
all
I
we.
think happens is that in the wintertime, people shouldn't be, but sometimes they ice skate on there, and that's something we wanna make sure.
We
We've
discourage.
discussed, you know, with
We
CPL
discourage.
and
Yeah,
and Jim,
exactly.
whether or not we can shut it down and fill it in, but apparently it now has wetland status.
Correct.
Right, Jim? I think
And I
is our
think some
concern.
part of it was a wetlands abatement thing for
So we
another
have a
portion of the park.
Big
Well,
issue.
I could see some value in it being a skating pond if it was safe,
Yeah, if it was safe.
but, I mean, right now, I think it's
That's a
more.
big if, though.
What's
Yeah.
that?
That's a big if, though.
Well, all it's gotta do is freeze, right?
I
Yeah.
think it's a little bit more than that.
There's a little bit of an issue, and Steve could elaborate. The bank of it is a little iffy on where it starts and where it ends in certain areas, and
So-
where there were fences and aren't.
Well, if there was a fence
Yeah.
that the town put up and it's not being maintained,
need to
and
get-
someone falls in there and drowns,
It's a very-
that to me is a major red flag. I'm sure Haran is shaking his head. So, especially since there's kids running all over the
Yes.
place over there. Well, I'm talking about the kids who are the brothers and sisters of those playing soccer.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right? So maybe we can take a look at that and make it safer.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea to do sooner than later.
Just as
There's
importantly.
also, oh, sorry.
Just as importantly, Frederick, where's the revenue coming in from that cell site? That's what I want to know. Is that ours?
Yes,
So that's a revenue line someplace in this budget, right?
should be.
And is that's operational now?
Well, I'm just trying to, bring it
Yes,
back to the budget real quick, because that was the first thing I noticed. I mean, it looks like a tree. I guess it's supposed to look like a tree, but it's a cell site, so, anyway, when we get to the budget, I'd be curious to know
That
where that.
that was approved last year, and I believe this certificate of compliance was issued probably earlier this year. So, the lease was signed
I know you were working on
a
it.
while ago, but it was contingent upon, the lease payment, I believe, was contingent upon it actually, going into service. It's either into service or issuance of a building permit. I'd have to go back. and
All right, well, either way, I don't want to go off
Yeah.
on that tangent, but the point is, here's a good example of a revenue generator on a town property, right? I do agree with some of those, I don't know if they weren't emails, they were Facebook threads. I do agree that, when we look at other initiatives in the town, we need to also not forget about our existing properties. So I think a good start on this property would be just to make sure that if any fences pre-existed or were there, perhaps we can take a look at, especially that one.
Steve, on your list, you had a list of items for Rockingham. Did you include the fence on that? I don't have it in front of me.
Actually, my suggestion was to fill that.
Yeah, and we determined we can't.
Well, I
I'm
don't,
still working on that.
I don't
Okay.
necessarily, again, you'd need a permit to fill it.
Okay.
It doesn't,
It's designated as wetlands, and when you do the area, it's just about an acre, so it's perfectly like 1 acre of wetlands.
so, I don't,
But if it was part of somebody just said an effluent pond, so maybe, there's. a
Yeah,
part of it
you-
that is man-made part of that.
Because we decommissioned that plan a while back.
well, that's where the tower is.
Yes, right.
So,
Well, the building is still back there.
yeah.
Where the plant used to be, it's all boarded up and stuff, but I was wondering what that was.
But, I think that it's, I agree with Steve, it doesn't really serve a whole purpose.
Well, yeah, can we look into seeing if we could just
Yeah.
fill it?
Sure.
Because that would be the simplest answer.
So that's a
Jessica, are they using light towers back there? Is that what the problem is?
What they're doing is bringing in generators and light towers.
And cars, too.
I was gonna say that
Yeah, I know, because
the light
obviously I've been in
tower.
touch with the resident as much as you have, so
Yeah.
I know the whole story,
Yeah,
so.
that's part of compromise I would like to talk about in executive session, so. But that kind of summarizes the complaint, if you guys, when you do, or if you do go into executive session tonight, I could probably go over the rest of it with you in about 5 minutes or less. But to tack on to the end of this, Quiet Acres, Councilman Phillips and I were discussing the other day, and I discussed it with the supervisor, the idea of Quiet Acres really needing a facelift. It is a park that's needed a facelift for quite some time. There's been plans in the past that I've put together and brought forward for one reason or another, financial and otherwise, they haven't moved forward. So I'm in the process of, at the councilman's request, going back through those plans, running some new numbers, but then also checking to see what's newer and better out there that might be suited for that park in terms of equipment and facilities.
And as we've seen younger families moving into the area, we're finding more use and interest in using the park.
Yeah.
Whereas before, there maybe had not been, but now that's changed. And so
Yeah.
we're looking at it, and I think Councilman Phillips has been, talking with, with a number of us, but also we have some immediate needs with respect to the slide and board and so forth that are, dangerous,
Safety
Yeah,
potentially.
we had
So
a
we have
plan.
to look at that.
Yeah, we had a plan for pocket parks at some time, at least last year or 2 years ago, so I don't know where that got left off, but it is something to start revisiting.
Yeah, I have all those individualized plans for each of those parks.
But we are now seeing a great interest as, I walked, I think Chris walked, I think as Kevin, walked the area. We've seen a
Yeah,
lot
no.
of interest on this.
I certainly agree, making sure that we first look at our current parks and make sure we maintain them properly should be the first priority.
I agree.
So we'll come back to that, once you've
Yes.
gotten the summary of
Yeah.
the
Of
cost.
the-
Chris is championing it. so.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
very much.
Okay.
The next item, and I don't see anybody from Highway Department here, and I will add that our highway superintendent, not only did he have a bad toe that's a surgery, but he fell down some steps and seriously hurt, his ribs, so that's why he's not able to be here. And I'll pass this out. I did get information, and it includes a couple of the other items to talk about, but that we discussed as far as the agenda goes. But the first item, I've discussed with both, our highway superintendent-elect, John DiMartino, and the immediate need is for a front-end loader, wheel loader for salt. And that's what this, top memo describes. It's a $188,000 cost. We've had an old Samsung, loader that basically they, despite the miracles, I think, that our mechanics perform up there, they can no longer get parts, for that loader. And this is critical with respect to loading the trucks with salt, unloading it, and moving it around as one of the key, functions. So what the highway superintendent, has, requested, John DiMartino has supplied, and like I said, I have talked with the superintendent-elect, and all in agreement that we need to get this loader, if we can now, get it before the heavy snow season, because the existing one is about ready to stop functioning. And that's $188,000. I've discussed it, and the highway superintendent discussed it previously with Frederick. Frederick, maybe you can report to the board where you would be drawing the money down from if we were to approve it.
So I believe we can, because we have some money in the highway fund balance, we can do it from the highway DB fund balance to actually purchase it this year in the current year's budget.
Yeah, so
Do the resolution.
that would be appropriate, and the easiest thing, I'd have to look. I think it was off of either a bid consortium or
They had proposed, for us, and we had discussed, that a lot of the other equipment we would be looking at as to, bonding, but this is part of the
Yeah,
big
no.
consortium for the New York State,
Right, so that-
purchase.
that-
So it reduced the cost from what it would
well,
have been.
and the other issue too is that
We
way
don't
you
have
don't
to-
have to prepare bid specifications.
yeah.
So you
That-
don't have to
that's
go out to
absolutely correct.
competitive bidding.
And I've looked at the spec and discussed it with John and DiMartino, and he feels that this is the best buy and will get the longest, life, as well as be able to be repaired as needed. But at this point in time, it really is a critical purchase. I think the other equipment, well, it's important. We can talk about that, later in part of the bond package or something else. But
I know in prior discussions I've had with John DiMartino, he had said that the resale value
Yeah.
of these loaders actually pretty good. The state bid and and these bid
Right.
consortium numbers are probably about half of what they're going for on the competitive market. He said that there are municipalities where they put them in service for 3 years and then resell them as surplus. And the cost of the used 3 or 4 year old loader can buy you a brand new one. So,
So I think part of what we'd be looking at with respect to equipment is, moving it after about 3 years and, and getting a new one that will save us money over a long time. But right now, there is this critical need, so I'd like to request the board, off the dais to, if you don't have other questions, to approve this, we'll, have a motion and for us to discuss it.
As long as it's properly funded, as Frederick mentioned, I'll certainly make that motion.
Is this sold through HO Penn or through the state? Is this through Penn or through the state?
I think it may well be through Penn. Most of the stuff we get is through Penn, and I know
Okay.
Penn participates in the consortium. And, some of it may, if Penn has it, some of it too is timing. So I know there's Penn's on a number of bid lists, and
I've had a lot of experience with the heavy equipment and
yeah,
the Caterpillars.
we
the way-
typically buy, a lot of stuff from Penn. They're very responsive, and they're on all of the consortium lists, as is Caterpillar.
So does that mean Councilman Phillips
I
second?
second it. Yes.
So on the question, you're proposing that we use fund balance to pay for this out of the DB fund, is that correct?
Yes, we would transfer the amount required from the DB fund balance into the
Equipment line.
equipment line and use that line to buy the equipment.
How much is in the DB fund right now?
About approximately 1 million.
Okay. I'm just unsure why we're getting this in the form of an email to purchase a $188,000 asset without any discussion prior to this, and why it's not a capital purchase as part of a bond.
I think, it was really, I found out about it and asked for some information, so I tried to, do the best I can to get it, here. As to the bond, I think what we've discussed with Frederick is if we do some additional, funding, then, maybe we can, repay it, in that context, but
I mean, I
it
think,
was just because the urgency was brought to my attention.
John DiMartino had sent, this is, the original email was, I believe, back in, probably sometime in the summer. But I don't know if it ever made it to the board.
Yeah,
I didn't see it.
yeah.
And I think I believe it was in, I don't know if it was in the budget proposal from the highway superintendent. May well have been.
But he brought it to my attention, the urgency. and-
Right.
And so, it's-
I mean, there's a video on Facebook of our loader right now operating, loading a truck. So I just have major reservations here about approving a $188,000 purchase off the cuff like this. I mean, there's a video right now on Facebook of Mike Sheehan operating the loader that was posted 2 days ago. So I don't really consider this a critical situation. We're going to spend $188,000 in fund balance on this. I don't think that's good practice.
I've been told that that loader is no longer repairable and that it's fallen apart and it's just basically now, they're operating it in order to get by, but it's not going to last, Bill. That's the criticality because of the need to have it for the snow season, and we don't have one, and it's not going to make it, past December is what they're saying.
No, I don't consider this
Okay,
good
that's fine.
practice in purchasing a capital piece of equipment out of general fund balance in the 11th hour. This is something that should have been, the highway superintendent should have been standing here making this proposal back in the summer when John DiMartino expressed this need. We should have been able to plan for a capital purchase appropriately and bonded this, just like we do for the dump trucks and the other pieces of equipment. I don't think this is the right precedent to set, to spend nearly $200,000 on something based on an email that was just received.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree with Councilman Beal on that respect, but since we're here where we are now, if it's something that's needed, I don't see why we can't purchase it if it's something that's needed. The fact that we could have done it maybe more efficiently if it was done earlier, I think is water under the bridge at this point.
Well, I would argue that, we're setting a precedent here to send an email to the town board to make a purchase that's not budgeted, and this is a nearly $200,000 purchase. I mean, I understand we have fund balance, but, I don't know why this can't be a formal proposal with specifications that we can review and look at from a procurement standpoint, and review and make an educated decision based on specifications, comparable specs. This is an email.
So, there was an email from John DiMartino back in August to the highway superintendent. I don't know. Was dated August 13th, 2019, and it had the breakdown of the plow trucks. This was included with that, so.
Right, but did the highway superintendent at that time make that request?
I think that was part of the capital budget, the budget that he submitted.
It was
back in September.
$960,000
Right.
proposed.
So there's a total of 906,698.
906, yeah, I got my digits.
So that was the total, and included in that was the wheel loader, the Caterpillar 950 GC 4 cubic yards, an international four-wheel drive plow truck, two two-wheel drive plow trucks, and then a 2020 Chevrolet 350 registered cab, and a 2020 double cab. So I think that was a function of the capital budget that was submitted in September.
Right, so as part of the department's budget review, that was presented as part of the capital plan for 2020?
Right.
So what is the process by which we've previously purchased those types of assets?
Most of them we've done by bonding, I would agree with that. Based on the, I don't know here with respect to I think what the concern is that this is the only front loader that they have, so there is no backup. To the extent that this front loader goes down, there's nothing else in the department.
If this was part of the original capital plan that was presented in September, okay, I don't have an objection to reviewing the other assets on that plan once we get into, the 2020 year, okay? I will be willing to make an exception for this one piece based on a critical need, but I want to make it clear that this is not the appropriate way
Understood,
to
Bill.
approach
Yeah.
the town
And
board.
it's
for the
because of the
purchase.
critical need, and the others are going to be the capital
No.
budget. That was the whole issue here. When the chief mechanic came and raised it, urgently to say that, he has this, he's afraid we won't get through the winter.
Yeah, no,
More
Councilman-
than afraid.
Councilman Beal is correct. This
I
could
agree.
have probably been done better, but
I agree.
regardless of that, we do have to deal with what the current circumstances are.
Agreed.
I have no further discussion.
There's a motion and second,
Yep.
correct? Councilman, I'll wait for Councilman Patino to come back.
So that being said, we'll pause for a second on that if we can. The rest of those capital proposed assets, I think, when we get into first quarter 2020, we should have, a formal proposal for those assets presented by the new highway superintendent, if he agrees, right?
Right, exactly.
And then we should have the ability to explore options for funding, right?
Right.
I mean, I'm not always going to be a proponent of using cash on hand, depending on what time of year it is, right?
Right.
Because we could end up
Yep.
with a bad winter where we need some of that funding for, highway
That's right, agreed.
maintenance.
Agreed fully.
So, that being said, I think we should explore all finance options at that point.
Correct.
Based on what the need is from the new highway superintendent. But in this case, I will respectfully yield to the councilwoman, and
And I did discuss this today with the, council, the highway superintendent-elect, Bill, and he's in agreement with this, and also that process. I said the other trucks, equipment will wait until he takes it.
okay.
So, one of the other resolutions that's on this evening,
Well, point of order, we have a motion on the
and
table.
a
Oh, sorry.
Second.
Yeah, so we're waiting for you to come back, a motion
Thank
and
you.
second to vote on. So, the motion and second, all in favor? Aye. Any nays or abstentions? The motion passed. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
so, to the issue with respect to the trucks, there's a resolution on 2019-211 regarding amending the highway budget to reflect the sale of surplus equipment and some tree expenses. On that resolution, under the highway law, the sale of surplus highway equipment goes back into the capital, goes back in as a, basically is dedicated to the purchase of new capital equipment for the highway department. In conversation with the highway superintendent in drafting this resolution, John DiMartino has identified, or they've contracted with someone to do some work on some of the frames of at least, I believe, 2 trucks. One of the problems with the plow trucks is the salt is very corrosive, and there's a very big issue with respect to particularly the underbody and the frames.
Well, in the old trucks, they were welded together.
That
The new
too.
ones we're buying is one straight unit without
Right.
welding.
So, within probably the last 2 years, I guess, the highway department has been using a wash bay up on the town of LaGrange to wash the underbodies. But the intent of this budget amendment is to use that money to repair 2 frames for the plow trucks. So I believe the work has been, I don't know if they've gone out yet, but that's the intent of the budget resolution.
Yeah, that's Resolution 2019-211.
Right.
We can get to that, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so let's move on, folks, for the next item. This is the propane storage matter. I've been waiting diligently. Al, why don't you come up?
Good evening. Thank you for hearing us once again. My name is Alfred Capelli, architect. We're here to continue discussion on doing a zoning text amendment to allow a bulk liquid propane storage facility in an HB zone. This was triggered, if you remember, by Downey Energy, who's here this evening, looking to purchase a property on Old Route 9, just south of NNS, for that bulk facility. As we all know, Old Route 9 is a pretty heavily industrial and commercial road. The 4 residential properties that are there notwithstanding. Some of the items the last time we were here, we were asked to identify other properties. I think Mr. Stallman had put together a preliminary text amendment identifying perhaps limitations to a particular zone, to this HB zone. We were asked to identify what lots in the town of Wappingers in an HB zone would fit into that category. 5 acres, no access off of Route 9, et cetera, et cetera. And we identified three properties in total, our property being one of them. There were some safety questions, concerns, et cetera. And we have with us this evening, I think you remember Jody Amadin from Amadin Energy Consultants, who's an expert in her field with these types of facilities. And she's going to do a PowerPoint presentation this evening to educate and discuss the safety issues of these type of facilities. I believe you have a curriculum vitae, if you will, that we submitted previously for her level of expertise. If you will, I give you Jody Allen. Thank you.
Thank you. So what I wanted to elaborate on was the June 10th letter that basically answered some questions and went into a little more detail. So I cut this PowerPoint down, and listening to your agenda, I'm sure you're glad I did tonight. But I wanted to do a quick overview on propane, discuss the Downey project more specifically, and then go through the safety and training that they participate in and that would be required. So the physical properties of propane, it's tasteless, odorless, colorless. An odor is added, which is called ethyl mercaptan. It's mixed with an improper ratio of air to propane, 24:1. It will burn. 24:1 is 96% oxygen, 4% propane for ideal combustion. LP gas is capable of being either a liquid or a gas. It can be stored and transported as a liquid under pressure, and in normal outdoor temperatures, liquid LP gas LP liquid expands into a gas. Propane, unlike oil, will dissipate. It doesn't sink into the ground, so it's non-toxic. I did want to just tell you a little bit about propane. In doing some research around New York, I found that New York is one of the largest consumers of propane in the country, behind California, Minnesota, and Texas. 358 million gallons of propane were consumed in the state of New York in 2016, and of that, 220 million gallons were used by residents. 90% of the propane in our country is domestic and is coming from natural gas. So it is very reliable and readily available out of the Marcellus Shale and Ohio finds. So what propane's used for here in the community are home heating, cooking, electric generation standby has been expanding greatly, grills, patio heaters, and then for commercial applications, forklifts, space heaters, construction, lawn maintenance. It is used for agriculture, for crop drying, pest and weed control, water systems. School buses are a huge thing, and we can't get enough propane school buses for the demand in this country. It's also used in commercial fleets like Schwann, UPS, and is the most widely used alternative fuel. What constitutes a propane storage facility or a propane bulk facility? There's three common things that make up a storage facility. You have tanks where you receive propane in that are offloaded into, and then you load out. Every propane storage facility, whether it's 18,000 up to 120,000 gallons, requires safety and emergency to stop the flow of propane. There are more than 13,500 propane retail bulk facilities. Now, there are other facilities that are used for industrial or commercial, but just what Mr. Downey is proposing, there are over 13,500 facilities in the U.S. They're built to industry standards and government standards. They're installed on a firm foundation, which we refer to as piers, concrete reinforced with rebar, and they are protected to prevent tampering. About Mr. Downey's project, the location is Old Route 9. The number of tanks that we are proposing are two 45,000-gallon ASME tanks. His hours of operation would primarily be Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. There might be an occasional period where a truck might have to go in and load to make a delivery to someone who might be out of gas, or a transport that might have to come in at night, but that is not the normal practice. The number of employees at the plant, in the wintertime there will be 3 employees to start with. Those are all drivers 2 are full-time and 1 would be a seasonal driver. Plant security, we've discussed that. We haven't made final recommendations, but code requires that it be fenced, it have lighting, that it be locked. We are also looking at security cameras, and some of those things will be discussed as we move further on in our planning. Landscape planning,
Out Maxwell. Go to sleep yet?
I'm sorry.
Go tell them, turn it off.
Okay.
You're not sure.
Landscaping will work with the community to make sure that we're meeting all codes and that we're also meeting all security and fire for life safety.
Okay.
The traffic, it's going to be minimal. We, as I stated in the June 10th letter, there'll be 5 to 6 delivery truck trips during the winter with 1 transport a day during the week, and about a third of that during the summer. Special safety measures and considerations, that will be as we go forward in the planning. This is a site plan, and I just wanted to demonstrate traffic coming in.
Yeah, it doesn't show on this surface, yeah.
Trust me, I tried, it doesn't.
All right. So traffic will be entering the north entrance. The bobtails will be coming behind the tanks and offloading on the southern side of the plant. And the transports will be coming around the front to offload. Then we'll be exiting the south portion, so it'll be a series of right-hand turns. And then they'll be exiting Old Route 9 at the light. Ooh, that didn't work very well. There you go. I'm sorry, we'll just skip that. That's basically the schematic of the plant. It shows a series of piping that comes off for the transport and a series of piping that comes off for the bobtail. It's roughly 10 feet of piping. It was really to illustrate just how minimal it is. The safety and bulk plant safety designs that I had in the letter on June 10th are all listed here. This whole portion of the presentation came out of another presentation that I did last November for the Swansea, Massachusetts Volunteer Fire Department, and all of the pictures illustrate the different safety devices. The fencing and the locking valves, crash protection, the emergency shutoffs, I'll show you both the manual and the automatic, back check valves, and I'll give a little explanation about what they do, the internal valves, hydrostatic reliefs, pressure relief valves, and the bulkhead breakaways. This is the facility in Swansea, Massachusetts. You're looking at 2 45,000-gallon tanks. They're roughly 14 feet from the ground, 69 feet long, and 11 feet in diameter. And it's crash protected all the way around with bollards 4 feet on center, roughly 4 inches, steel reinforced. And this particular customer has decided to use a Cumberland Farms color scheme. Those are the covers, plastic covers over the bollards that are from Cumberland Farms. Thank you. Can I use this? Okay. The first slide you're looking at is where the transports come in and load. These are liquid lines and vapor lines, and this is your emergency shutoff and your electric shutoff. So you can shut the whole facility off at both of the stanchions. You have, this has a meter which this facility will not have, but you have vapor and two liquid lines because you offload transports here and you can load bobtails at this particular facility, at this stanchion. And it's all crash protected, so a truck can't back into it. Over here you have manual shutoffs. And you have this black tubing that you can see on all the piping. That is very, very fine plastic tubing that melts in the event of a fire. It's charged with nitrogen, and it allows us to open and close the valves. Without having that charged and intact, you cannot open the valves. The valves are normally closed unless the tank is being loaded or offloaded. This is a site valve and a check valve that indicates what direction the propane flows. Okay, and could you...
Get that microphone over there. Get the...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Get that.
Just try and speak louder. These are our hydrostatic relief valves. They're so you can't overpressurize the lines. And this is probably the newest safety and the thing that's revolutionized propane bulk plants, is these are internal valves for your vapor and your two liquid lines. They're always in a closed position, so they don't leak. And they're charged with the nitrogen, and these are what we call actuators. And so when the nitrogen button is hit, the actuators open the valves so that you can load or offload. And there's also manuals. And you can see the plastic lines. Those melt at 212 degrees. So, and this is your loading stanchion. Again, the same emergency shutoff. You're killing the power, you're killing the propane. And these are pumps that are loaded, used to load bobtails. In the operation, when transports come in, they use the PTO shaft off the transport to load into the plant. But when bobtails come in to load, they use a pump to pull propane off. These are just your gauges at the end of the tank. You've got pressure, temperature, percentage, and then you've got your data plate, which tells you everything about your tank, your size, your working pressure, your serial numbers, national board numbers. And this is a pressure relief valve off the top of the tank. But it's pretty basic. There aren't a lot of openings. There aren't a great deal to it. I spoke briefly when I was here in the spring about what's available for fire services and emergency preparation. We work very closely to coordinate with local firefighters, and emergency responders is a huge priority. There is a program called Propane Emergencies. It was established by the National Propane Gas Association. We do use it in Montour Falls. I think I did explain when I was here earlier that I do train for the New York Propane Gas Association as an emergency response trainer, and that training is available to anybody in the emergency management or on the fire department. There are 35 states that use it. We've trained over 200,000 firefighters, and we constantly are updating the program. This is just a testimonial from a hazmat officer that gave this statement. Sorry, try not to keep walking away. That gave this statement to the National Propane Gas Association after attending the training. He said, "The propane industry's commitment to safety and health of the nation's emergency response community is very strong. In fact, the Propane Emergency Program, which has trained our firefighters on safety, responding to a propane incident, serves as a model program for other industries to follow." So, propane bulk plants have an excellent safety record, and part of that is because of our rigorous training, our CTEP training, which is the Certified Employee Training. And a note about Mr. Downey is that he has a trainer that he keeps on retainer that comes in and works with his staff once a month. someone that I've worked with for many, many years, John Hart. We also implement industry-based practices and procedures, and we follow state and federal regulations and standards. There was a study done, and it's an older study by the DOE that looked at public fatalities caused by storage facilities, and it found that less than 1 in 37 million people have been injured in a propane-related incident. You want to go to the next? This is actually their findings. More people are injured in motor vehicle and air crashes, lightning strikes, tornadoes, dam failures, than in propane-related incidents. Can go to the next one, please.
How many propane facilities are there in this country?
Of this nature, 13,500 bulk facilities that are just used to store it for retail use. As I stated, all the employees that handle propane that have access to the facility, whether they are Downey's drivers or whether they are the common carriers that are coming in and bringing the bulk, they are CTEP trained. The different training programs that they have to take are plant operator, and they have to take bulk delivery, the different segments. There's also segments that have to do with training, appliance repair, cylinder, but the requirements are all there. And the other is the security awareness, which is the hazmat training. Any employee that's hired has to take that within 90 days, and then it needs to be refreshed each year.
So the plant's being set up for bulk or bobtail delivery, correct?
Yes, only.
What about eventually, is there a plan to do cylinders or no?
He says no.
Okay. And is your deliveries done by like LP Transport and people like that? Yeah, okay.
Propane storage facilities follow the 2 fire safety codes developed by National Fire Protection, NFPA 54 and NFPA 58, which is the standard for storage and handling of liquefied petroleum. We'll also follow all local codes and anything over and above those codes. So the 4 main reports that I would be personally working on would be the fire safety analysis that's required for any facility that's over 4,000 gallons. And that report looks at the facility, the surroundings, the capability of the local fire department. And that's a joint effort with emergency management and local fire. Then we would also put together an operating and maintenance plan that will be just how people come in and their whole procedure and what every component is and how it's maintained and how often. And then the hazmat plan, which I just explained in the earlier slide, 90 days after employment and once a year refreshed. And then the emergency action plan, I don't feel, it will not fall on Mr. Downey at this time with just 3 employees. But when he hits that number of 10, he would have to include that. The emergency action plan looks more at possible accidents that could happen within the facility. There's sections on tornadoes. It looks at a lot of different things, not just what could happen gas-related, community-related too. And then I'd like to address some of the concerns that most often come up by boards. Proximity to other properties, noise, odor, and I'll kind of take those one at a time. It sits in sort of a mixed use. I mean, there are a lot of commercial, but there are some residential locations that are between 300 and 500 feet from the facility. Code requires they only be 75 feet, but that's just where they are. The noise that would occur, there wouldn't be any noise on the plant, at the plant except when trucks are loading or offloading. So that would be, in the wintertime, would be 1 transport a day and might be 5 to 6 bobtails just during the day is the primary time. And I have done noise studies in other areas and have looked at exactly how loud the pump is, how loud the truck is, and how much it dissipates. So in looking at the pump that will fill the bobtails, it is 70 decibels at the pump, if you measure right at the pump. And then at 50 feet away, it's reduced by 1/3. And the truck that I last measured roughly 80 decibels. And again, some of that is based on your wind direction, your screening, so that can be somewhat subjective. The odor, propane does have an odor, but we don't burn it or let it saturate and leak. The only time that you would have an odor or there would be a release is when they blow off a hose. And that is about a radius of 25 feet, so that odor would be contained on the site. Traffic, I think I've gone over that as far as the trips and the location and direction that trucks will be flowing. I can't speak to erosion, but Al, I think you'll do a plan for runoff and water. It will be paved coming into the plant and exiting the plant, and I think the plan is for... Okay. Okay. So pavement and gravel. And the lights, it will be lit for security, but they will be directional and nighttime low lights. And the visibility of the tanks, there again, that will come in with a screening, and we'll work with the town on that. So.
Okay. Thank you for the overview. Any questions, Bill? I know you had some questions previously.
Yeah, how many acres is the parcel that you're going to be on, do you know?
6.2.
And what is the footprint of these tanks approximately, how many?
11 by 69 each tank.
11 by 69, and they're right next to each other?
There's 7 feet in,
Separated.
7 feet in between.
Yes.
And they're 14 feet off the ground, is that correct?
Yep.
In the cradle, they're 11-foot diameter, and they're in the concrete cradle that lifts them slightly off the ground, yes. 14 feet above, yes, the top of the tank.
Did we look at elevation on this parcel as compared to the residential parcels that are 300 to 500 feet away?
I know we have some information regarding that, yeah.
It's something that they do. It's okay. So we have 4 residential properties, 5 residences all told. So we have one to the north, east of us, which is uphill. We have the one that's, I'll say, the first one diagonally across the street, pretty level. And then we're going slightly downhill. So I'm not talking about a tremendous difference in elevation, 5 feet maybe. And again, this is subject to our engineering, finalizing the engineering. I literally I measured from the tanks to the homes, and it varies from 300 to over 500 feet from our tank, which is 100 feet away from our property line. So you're talking about from the tanks to any residential houses, 300 to 500 feet, the few that are across the street or adjacent to the property.
Is this a Tier 2 facility? Yes. And just full disclosure, I am the county emergency manager and the LEPC coordinator.
And what's the difference for us on Tier 2, Tier 1? Bill, what's that mean?
You want to explain what a Tier 2 facility is?
I don't usually prepare the reports for them.
So based on storage on site, it meets certain standards for additional reporting relative to federal DOT guidelines. From a county perspective, Tier 2 facilities are a greater hazard, and that's why I have many questions about this relative to proximity to residences and elevation. Obviously, propane is not natural gas. Propane is heavier. So if there were to be a release at this site, whether from a vehicle or from the tank itself, there could be an impact. These are all questions that I think we need to, we need to discuss, obviously. The fire department obviously should provide some input to this. I'm a former fire chief in that fire department, but, certainly would like to hear their position on this. And then at that point, I'm not saying at this point I'm against this. I just want to make sure that we, entertain all these potential concerns. That being said, on a 6-acre parcel with proper screening, with all of these issues that you discussed, taken under consideration, then I'll feel more confident about entertaining a text amendment within that zone. But that's why you're hearing more questions from me than you probably would hear from a council member, because I deal with this every day, Tier 2 facilities throughout Dutchess County. So I want to make sure before we plant one right here, and I do understand Stargas, or correction, what's the name of the place on the corner of 9 and Smithtown? Is that Stargas?
No. It's
No.
Tech
Air, excuse me.
Tech Air.
I do realize that there are certain parallels that exist just up the street, okay? Relative to storage and capacity and things like that. But I think the difference is right now we have a vacant parcel versus a grandfathered property that's been there for quite some time. So that said, I would like the fire department to provide some input, and the fire inspector, the town fire inspector, to provide some input on this as well. And then what is the next step for a text amendment? Is that a legislative action, local law?
Yes. I had drafted a local law back in the summer that we went over, which we can go over again at some point. And then you, basically, Bill, were asking for more information. That was the purpose of having this
Yes.
presentation tonight. And Al mentioned earlier other parcels in the HB zone that would be eligible because they would be 5 acres or more in size. And would have access other than directly to Route 9. And I don't know if that was clear enough, but there are basically 4 parcels in the HB zone like that. One is this Downey site, second is Plant Depot, third is the Mercedes site, and fourth is an HB parcel in the northwest quadrant of Route 9 and Middlebush Road that has access to Route 9.
Right.
To Middlebush.
Right.
So there aren't that many parcels in the town that would be eligible for this, given this size, minimum, and access other than directly to Route 9. We also talked about possibly putting this in the AI district on Airport Road.
I think that they're looking for closer access to Route 9 corridor, if I'm hearing this correctly.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
We're just talking about eligible
Right,
parcels.
right. So I think my concern has been, let's make sure we're doing the due diligence on this and exploring these potential issues that, although unlikely, right, we still want to make sure that we at least have the conversation. That said, if we can get input from, what's the action going to be? So if text amendment, then they can move forward with the planning board application, is that correct?
Right, it'd be a special permit use from the
So,
planning board. yes.
so I guess the one question is, from a seeker point of view, are we going to do coordinated review or not? I guess it's a type 1.
It's a type 1 action. We should do a coordinated review, yes.
So, I think the thing to do would be to have the planning board serve as lead agency for purposes of the seeker review.
Right, so that would be done after the local law is introduced presumably.
Correct.
So getting back to your initial, what would be the next thing?
Yeah.
After all the research has been done and you're somewhat satisfied, a bit more comfortable perhaps, you would introduce a local law by resolution to amend the code.
Okay, so I don't think it's a far reach to entertain that local law at the December 9th meeting. That will give us the time to get the input from the fire inspector, the fire department. The planning board chairman happens to be a former fire chief also, so I'm kind of curious what his thoughts are on this as well. Then we can move forth on December 9th, assuming that there's no major concerns, because ultimately, this is going to go through a secret process, right?
Well, we would have to do the secret process to adopt.
Yes.
Right, so ultimately, we're going to be looking at impacts and looking at these things more definitively through the planning board process. But I just want to make sure before we move ahead with that text amendment that we're not missing anything.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
And, I appreciate you did a great presentation. I've been to Montour Falls many times. I've taken, propane training and things like that. And I do work with a number of, gas industry professionals, and you folks are all very professional, so I appreciate that. But I just want to make sure from the residential perspective, we're just doing our due diligence and making sure that we're covering the bases.
So we'll coordinate a meeting as suggested.
Right.
Mr. Bear, would you like to be present when we coordinate?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep, I think it's good. Thank you.
December 9th,
Yeah.
but before then-
But before that, we have to cover what Bill has requested.
100%. We'll do that within the next,
So next Monday, we're going to have a meeting to finalize the budget, right?
Right.
So after next Monday
okay,
and before December 9th.
okay. Understood.
Right, yeah, no meeting, because we have work to do on other things.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
okay,
Thank you.
thank you. yeah.
Appreciate all your work.
Thank you very much.
Bill, who would be the responding company there?
Houstonville.
Houston?
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, do you want to take a break for restroom?
If you do,
I do.
I'll move that we recess for 5 minutes.
Do
Second,
we have a,
Second.
all in favor? Aye. Any nays or abstentions, motion passed. We'll take a break for 5 minutes.